Hello and welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. Manning II here. Appreciate you joining us as always. I am joined by Ken Morefield or Kenneth, if you want to be, look at the birth certificate. Kenneth Morefield, and Ken and I have known each other for a few years. Ken is the founder of the North Carolina Film Critics Association and also the artsandfaith.com website, I guess we'll call it that. But you've got so many different things under that umbrella. And today we're having you on to talk about a top 10 list. And Ken, I'd love for you to talk about what is this top 10 list and why are we talking about it today? And it relates to arts and faith.
Sure. So first of all, Noel, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be score an invite to certainly North Carolina's premier or best movie podcast, maybe one of the best nationwide in terms of consistent quality. So thank you so much for having me. The Arts and Faith Ecumenical Jury started in 2014. It was an offshoot of a number of writers, including me, were doing movie criticism at Christianity Today, particularly their online site. And the editor at the time wanted not just an end-of-year top 10 list, but a second list that was geared towards their target audience, which was Christian readers. So when Christianity Today downsized around 2014, I wanted to keep alive the idea of an end-of-year list that was niche-targeted, that wasn't just the same old top 10, 15 best films, but was, a curated list directed towards Christian critics. So through that eventually was tied to arts and faith to designate that it was separate from the ecumenical jury at Con or whatever, that were not affiliated with Interfilm in any way. So the express purpose of the list is to get critics who identify specifically as Christian and to select films or acknowledge and honor films that we particularly recommend for Christian audience.
Awesome. And you do have several critics who have joined us this year and have been doing that for the past 10 years. The website, check this out if you want to see the full list and a lot of other rich material. It is artsandfaith.com. Make sure you spell out artsandfaith.com. Well, let's dive into this list. It is a top 10 list, so we're going to try to get through as many of these as we can. Number one on the list, Ken, is a juror. Number two, a Clint Eastwood picture that truly flew under the radar. There are a lot of folks that have not had a chance to see this, but I tell you, more people need to for sure.
Yes, my understanding, too, was that while it was released for affiliated critics for screenings, that it didn't really have a theatrical release, and that Warner Brothers was going to give it almost direct to video with maybe a few. So I wouldn't be surprised that a lot of people hadn't yet seen it audience-wide. And sometimes the studio doing that would signal that they don't anticipate as positive a response as some other film that they might be pushing for awards. But almost all of the critics that I've talked to in faith circles have been much more positive about the film than I think I anticipated or the studio anticipated. I think you were pretty positive about it as well, were you not?
Absolutely. I love this film. I think how it speaks from a Christian standpoint to me, it talks about sacrifice. It talks about our personal integrity and really ask the question, what are we willing to do what's right? How far are we willing to go? What are we willing to sacrifice? And those are the things that really stand out to me. It also looks at family and it looks at identity. It looks at a lot of things, but sacrifice and the willingness to sacrifice, truly strong standing for me with this film, juror number 2 for sure. Any one final thought you want to share about that before we move on to Conclave as number 2?
One of the things that I appreciated is that Eastwood's ability to embrace maybe some moral ambiguity. There is a tendency in Christian films to assume that there always needs to be an uplifting or happy ending. And films that are true or truly engaged and not just propaganda, don't always assume that there will be a happy ending or an ending that paints Christians in the best possible light. That'll be true about film number 2 as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about film number 2, Conclave. Give me 3 highlights of this film that you think stand out to you or to those you've spoken to in the faith circles, Christian circles, of how this speaks to them.
Well, so I think for me, the essence of Conclave is an examination of the intersection between what it means to have faith in God versus faith in a process or an institution that one truly believes that God has ordained. The central internal conflict in Conclave is about whether or not someone will manipulate a process in order to get an outcome that he thinks is good, either good for God, or he will let the process play out, trusting that God will work not just through him, but through other people within the process. So again, one of my highlights is the fact that I think the film is a little bit more ambiguous than some people who are praising the Ralph Fiennes character make it out to be, as sort of like, well, there are the manipulative ones and then there's the sincere one. I think he is more sincere than them, but it also examines, the impact of little compromises versus big compromises, which is food for thought that a lot of Christians need to think about.
Conclave, one of the best films of the year. Number 2 on this list. Number 3, an animated film. Am I correct?
Yes. Flow was my personal favorite film of the year. On my own personal top 10, I had it the highest. When you talk about an animated film about animals, that suggests kiddie film, but it's not at all. And I think the essence of the message to Christians for me through the film is ties into whether we are prisoners of our own identity or we can overcome our own animal instincts, whether or not it's necessary. Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. To put aside differences when we are faced with an existential crisis. The film is about a number of animals on a boat trying to survive a flood. And the thing that I love about the film is that it doesn't deny enmity between cats and dogs or birds. They aren't just anthropomorphized humans in animal form. They are consistent with their character as animals, but it shows animals in the face of extinction or survival finding a way to work together and live together for the mutual benefit of all, even if that doesn't turn them into liking each other.
Well, let's move on to a Wim Wenders film. Perfect Days is the next on this list from artsandfaith.com.
So Wim Wenders has been, a mainstay on the Arts and Faith Top 100 spiritually significant list. So I wasn't surprised to see this film make it, although, again, it's not in the same level of being advertised or being well aware. I personally haven't seen the film, so I'm going to have to, turn that back to you, with just the comment that one of the things that's been a true joy for me about the ecumenical jury is when you go into a jury list, it's not just about advocating conclave style for the film that you want, but it's also an opportunity to say, what are my blind spots? What have I missed? So obviously, when my colleagues really voted that up, then, and that's really the purpose of having lists like this to begin with, is, okay, here's one more list, but the best use of that list is to provide people with hey, I hadn't heard about that. I might really like that. Let me check it out. So what can you tell me about Perfect Days?
I think it does speak to daily living, how we live out our lives as we are kind of walking through this life, who walks through it with us, and in these mundane experiences, where do we find and where can we find the spiritual?
Just to alert your viewers that they will find at artsandfaith.com, not just the list itself, but each item on the list will have a link to, I call them appreciations rather than just reviews, from a juror explaining, why did I vote for this film? Why do I think it's appropriate for Christians? As well as some honorable mentions if a critic had a film that didn't make the list. So there's a lot of good, if you hear a film that we mention and sort of say, like, why would that be there? You can go to the site and ask the juror to explain, okay, here's why I think this is appropriate.
Yeah, and the site does a nice job setting things up too for why, what are we talking about when we're talking about films that can speak to the Christian audience. We've got just a couple minutes before our break, but there's a Flannery O'Connor adaptation with that Ethan Hawke is involved in, and anybody from the South that's read anything from Southern culture aspects, it may be familiar or should be familiar with Flannery O'Connor. The film is called Wildcat, next on the Ecumenical list of arts and faith for 2024.
Wildcat was another film that I had not seen prior to it being nominated, and then once it was nominated, I went back and watched it. I think, one of our colleagues, Lindsay Dunn, was a big advocate for the film, and, again, that speaks to jury or a community of critics,
Yes.
being able to talk up films that we might otherwise miss. Flannery O'Connor, of course, needs no explanation for most Christian audiences about why she's relevant. The film itself moves back and forth between her writing. It's not just an adaptation, but also her life and biography, particularly her dealing with lupus and, her interacting with that age-old question of, like, if God ordains all things, then why do bad things happen to good people or those people who sincerely love God? I think in that way it makes a nice companion piece to Conclave, which is about people who sincerely believe in God and want to follow God, but are sometimes confused as to, where God leads them when they do. So not just a rah-rah faith is great film, but also a film that dives, pretty deeply, but in an entertaining and informative way into some of the harder questions of faith, which is what I appreciated.
Well, we are going to take a quick intermission right here on Meet Me at the Movies, C19 TV. We are talking about the Arts and Faith Ecumenical Top 10 list for 2024. You can find this list at artsandfaith.com. And you can find that full list there. And we're going to come back after this intermission and see how many more of these films that we can check out right after this.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a
Education is our most powerful tool to improve and change our world. Hi, I'm Rhonda Benfield, your host for School Matters. Join me for a new program every other week with information from and about the students and staff of Cleveland County Schools. Discover what our schools are doing to challenge students and help them reach their full potential. You can catch us on Spectrum Cable Channel 19 or stream us live on C19.tv.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick?
Hello, welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here, hanging out with Ken Morefield, and we are talking about the Arts and Faith Top 10 list from the Ecumenical jury. You can find this list as well as tons of other items relating to arts and faith, artsandfaith.com. The top 10 list, we're trying to go through that and getting it to as many as we can. We are down to number 6. We started at number 1. We're moving our way down. So we're at number 6, Rebel Ridge, an action drama that kind of came out of nowhere on Netflix, I believe, is where it was launched, and really shocked a lot of people about just how good this film was. And I'm really happy to see it on this list.
Me too. I mean, I've even heard a number of my critic friends go so far as to say, Netflix really decided to push Amelia Perez as their sort of awards campaign, and Rebel Ridge flew under the radar. And it would be like, man, if they had reversed those and really gotten behind Rebel Ridge. But I think we were all surprised because a description of the plot, sort of, a black Marine railroaded by racist small-town cops or corrupt small-town cops, sounds so generic. Like, I've seen this film. I make the comparison in my review to the movie Aliens, where it's like it is a genre that we're all familiar with, but executed in a way that makes you realize, like, wow, you don't have to be in a prestige drama genre to write a gripping or an excellent film. There is excellence in action. There is excellence in horror. There is excellence in comedy. I really found myself not, I didn't think that he was going to die, because I'm in a genre where, realistically, like, afraid, how is he going to get out of this? What is going to happen? Much like Conclave, much like some of the other films on the list, really the thing that jumps out to me from a Christian standpoint is integrity. It is like, how much do we say that we believe things, and how much, when we are put to the test, do we really have faith in the system, in our abilities, in our principles? It's easy to say in retrospect that, I would die for this, or I would, give my life for this. But when actually called to say you might have to do that potentially, do we?
Yeah, and are we willing to give our life? And that kind of goes back to juror number 2. We were talking about, what are you willing to do in order to do what you feel is the right thing? And this kind of mirrors that in a different way. I will say, just from a technical side, that opening scene in that film was so gripping, and it had me from literally the opening shot. And those first 15 seconds, I was like, okay, where is this headed? And I could not look back. Rebel Ridge. That
was another comparison I would make with Aliens, where it's like, it's easy enough to just have lots of flash cut edits to connote chaos, but action scenes that are choreographed and shot where you really understand what is going on. There's a shot of him crawling under the car in one of them, that really, from a technical standpoint, excellently shot and choreographed in service of the story.
Absolutely. That film is Rebel Ridge. And next on our list at number 7, The Bike Riders.
I have a little bit less to say about that, so I would be interested, maybe to hear from you in terms of, most of what I would say would be plot summary. But have you given more thought to Christian elements, or how did you vote on this one?
So I think Jeff Nichols' The Bike Riders can speak to Christians in a lot of profound and maybe some reflective ways. I think about the sense of belonging and community. We see that here. Also wrestling with loyalty and conscience, redemption, transformation. That's a thought here. Also the search for identity. Who are we? How do we fit into the world? And what is that purpose within this world? And I think also you can look at love in the face of chaotic experiences, the cost of freedom, and the consequence of choices. Those are all things that speak to me as I look and think about the film The Bike Riders. And I think there's one final thought. I think it really is looking at grace for the outcast. For those that are on the outside, and for those that maybe looked at differently. And I think that's a beautiful thing that we can share about the bike riders and how it can reflect and speak to a Christian audience. It is an amazing film, and you talked about Jeff Nichols. He was also recognized in the nominations for the North Carolina Film Critics Association as well. He does have North Carolina connections. He went to the School of the Arts, and one of his student films actually showed up in the Reel-to-Reel Film Festival in Cleveland County, and so I did want to mention that.
It's one of the great joys of being a cinephile is like when you see someone on the ascendancy and you're like, I know that person's going to go places and I'm going to hear from him or her in the future, and then you do.
Yeah, absolutely. But the bike riders also on the list at number 7. And at number 8, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. And this is a film that was on my top list of the year for a lot of different reasons. Really stood out to me, and I loved the character from Mad Max Fury Road. And when I heard they were doing either a sequel at one point or a prequel, I was like, okay, I'm on. Count me on for that one.
I liked the film. This was one, when it was nominated, I was a little confused. I was like, good film, what's the faith connection? And so I really appreciate it. I think it was Andrew Eisenman did the write-up, and some of the things that he said on there, particularly about faith. I know there's a famous, I'm going to hope I say this right, hadith in the Quran that says if the world is going to end tomorrow, plant a tree, as being one exercise of faith, is the ability to labor not just for what is going to enrich your life, but what could potentially make the life better for those that come behind you, even if you never see the fruits or results of your labor. There is a mainstay on the Arts and Faith Top 100 list called The Man Who Planted Trees. And that idea of planting a seed has a rich resonance in Christian theology, in Islamic theology, of planting as an expression of faith, of investing in the future, that I think is a powerful message that is narratively embedded in Furiosa. So I was confused at first, but once some of the people who saw faith elements explained it to me, I'm like, yeah, I get that,
And for me, I think it also speaks to hope, even in the midst of suffering.
Yes.
There was a lot of suffering, a lot of hardship, and the perseverance that we as Christians can have through that. I mean, how do we persevere? I think about the Job-like experiences, and Furiosa had some of those Job-like experiences, and so finding a way to move beyond that and move through that and realize, no, there is something more, and I'm going to work for something more because I know it's out there. So we've got just a couple of minutes, and we've got a couple of films left, Dune Part 2 and The Wild Robot. So I'll let you chime in on either one of those or both if you'd like to.
So I've had mixed feelings about Dune over my life since I've, read the book. I really liked what the write-up had said. I mean, I think there's very obvious allegorical, or anthropological studies of faith. I'd always read Dune, the novel, as being anti-religious, or at least anti-jihadist, zealotry and religious war. So I liked the way that, I forget if it was Christian or Andrew at the text, in the text, managed to tie it specifically to Christian reflections of, choosing what is expedient politically or militarily or personally over what one truly believes is right. That was a new reading of Dune for me, and I've read a lot of readings or interpretations of Dune for me. So it really made me think.
And I'll say also, looking at Dune, the desert is a place of testing. We've seen that in the Bible, and also, warnings against power and corruption that can happen within faith communities. That kind of reflects back to Conclave as well. So any thoughts you want to share on The Wild Robot?
Much like Flow, I think is a good companion to Flow. I think one of the many questions that it asked is, what does it mean to have the capacity to love someone that is not human or is not your species or whatever? And if we don't feel as though we can love someone or something because they are not human, what does that say about our true belief that God could love us, even though we are not, God or deities or something like that? So that's the angle I like on that.
Yeah, I'll add just a couple more as well. I love how, we are called as humans, especially as Christians, to be good stewards for caring for creation. I see that resonating in this. Also, the power of community, and we're reminded of the importance of fellowship and unity within community, and sacrificial love. I think shows up here as well. When you consider what the characters we're going through, and redemption and transformation, those are some solid thoughts too that pop up in this film, The Wild Robot. Well, we actually made it through our top 10. I wish we'd had more time. I wish we had 7 hours or an hour per film. And but Ken, I really do appreciate you taking the time. Ken Morefield joining us right here to speak about the Arts and Faith Ecumenical Jury Top 10 list. You can find that list, artsandfaith.com, and quite a few other things too, including the past 10 years of those lists. I encourage you to dive in to that. Ken, any final thoughts or comments you want to make sure you share before we wrap today's show?
One slight criticism I had of the list, or concern I had of the list, I think Priska Bird mentioned in discussion, it's a fairly dark list, and that doesn't bother me in any one individual film, but there is an element of joy being part of the Christian experience as well, and so that really got me thinking about films like, maybe in the honorable mentions, The Taste of Things or whatnot, that communicate that being human, being Christian, isn't just a drudge or a fear, that living in the world can be hard, but joy is an also authentic part of the human experience, the Christian experience. And I was grateful for Priska's comment about that, because it made me think about, not just for this list, but in coming years, to seek out films that reflect that and remind me of that.
Absolutely. Ken Morefield, thanks for joining us. It's always good to see you, and look forward to having you back sometime in the future right here on Meet Me the Movies on C19 TV. And for all of those who choose to spend time with us, we do appreciate you as well. We know you have plenty of places to go for your entertainment, information, and just time. So thank you for taking that time to be with us. Until next time, for Meet Me the Movies and C19 TV and the entire cast and crew, I'm Noel T. Manning II, and that is a wrap.
The happy and the sad ones. We'll talk about the good ones and the bad ones. Many films to view till we meet again.